everybody. Happy Wednesday. Hope that you're all doing well. Welcome into GC Live. Kendall Smith, joined by my very good friend, Jack Veltri, and excited to be with you here today, Jack. I know it's been a busy day for you, and I'm sure all of our listeners have had busy days as well. So welcome into everyone. And Jack, let's start it off broad. How you doing, my friend?
When isn't it busy, right? I mean, for both of us, honestly. Like I know you're not covering South Carolina day to day, but you probably have it busier than most. But you know what's important? We're both here. We're thriving. We're surviving, and we're ready to talk some football. So hope you're doing well too.
Thank you. Doing well for sure. And yes, lots and lots to talk about here today on GC Live. We obviously heard from Dowell Loggins and Clayton White a little bit earlier today. Jack, you were in on all of that action, and we'll certainly get into the details of that here in just a little bit. But before we do, we know it. GC Live is brought to us by our very good friend, Clint Hammond from CMG Home Loans. Jack.
Yeah, that's right. So if you're in the need for, you're looking for a home, need help with your mortgage, Clint is your guy to call of CMG Home Loans. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003. He's helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth. So if you're interested in receiving some help from him, I mean, he's a lifelong Gamecock fan. He's a big-time supporter of Gamecock Central and whatever we do here. So if you're interested, give him a call, 803-422-6797, the number above us right there. You can go to ClintHammond.com, or the NMLS number for him is 71597. So appreciate Clint for all the support over the years.
Yes, thank you so much, Clint. I always say it, but he's been supporting Gamecock Central since before I was even at Gamecock Central, and I started my junior year of college. So really appreciate him and all that he does for us here at GC. And we've got another edition of GC Live. Thank you so much to everyone that's commenting, everyone that is tuning in right now. Like we said, a lot to talk about. Jack, this is my first time back on Gamecock Central since South Carolina's loss on Saturday to LSU. I have to tell you, I was here working baseball. It was our last home game of the season, and I was locked into South Carolina's game. I think everybody was locked in. It was in the middle of our first game of the day and our second game of the day. We had a day-night doubleheader situation, and I'm pretty sure everybody here, while we were waiting for that second game to start, was dialed in to that LSU South Carolina game. Obviously did not go the way that the Gamecocks wanted it to go. We won't get into all of that. I know that's been talked about a ton on Gamecock Central. So if you haven't already, check out GamecockCentral.com for everything that you want to hear and read about the game on Saturday. But we turned the page this week. We're halfway through the week. We are getting ready for South Carolina to take on Akron this Saturday at Williams-Brice Stadium. And the coordinators, they spoke today. Jack, you listened in to everything that they had to say. So we'll start off just overviewing, like a Spark Notes version. What were your key takeaways? Yeah, if you don't know what Spark Notes is, that is a great website where you can kind of read like a quick summary of certain books. So yeah, check that out. But Jack, what was your Spark Notes version of what the coordinators had to say here today?
Yeah, I think all of our listeners are, I would assume, old enough to, I don't know the age range of our listeners, but I'm assuming they're old enough to know Spark Notes and all that stuff. If we know what Spark Notes is, they should too, I would have to assume. So, but yeah, given like the Cliff Notes, Spark Notes version of what they had to say, we'll start off with Dowell Loggins. Obviously, offensively, I think they looked really good in that first half against LSU. I mean, you jumped out to a 17-0 lead. You were playing very well, and you scored 24 points with Lenore Sellers under center in that first half. Obviously, he got hurt, and we'll talk about him some more later, but things kind of, bogged down a little bit in that second half once Robbie Ashford came in at quarterback. And look, with Dowell, I mean, the first question he got was about, having to work the offense around these two different guys in that game. And, you try to play the quarterback's strengths, he was saying. And there's some similarities with both of those guys because, again, they're bigger, faster, stronger kind of guys. And that's the main similarities with them. But there's also a difference between them. And I think the main difference, at least to me, is obviously Lenore's is a better quarterback. But, the offense was obviously just a lot more dynamic under Sellers. And that's because he has a lot more reps. That's the main thing that Dowell was saying is that, Robbie has not gotten a ton of reps up to this point. And I mean, it's easier in practice because, you can get as many reps as you want, but in game, it's tough So he said you need to have a smart, intelligent backup that can work around that, and that's kind of just how it is. So they feel like they have a good situation there at quarterback. One thing that was a little bit of a concern to me, and I think a lot of people could feel this way, is ball security. I mean, it's been an issue to this point. They've had 9 fumbles, 3 of which have been lost and recovered by another team. And for Dow, I mean, it drives him nuts, and they need to be better. And that's something Shane Beamer's been talking about as well. So they're trying to get that cleaned up as best as possible. But again, it comes down to the 2 fumbles that they lost on Saturday both came on 3rd down. So in those situations, Dow would like them to either just throw the ball away or just hold on to it and not let it slip out when you're in those situations, because it did lead to LSU getting some points on the board, and I could bet better teams out there that in those situations can score touchdowns. So really got to be careful with that. But some other issues that we noticed, just 3rd downs, I think was something that has been a struggle, and it's something else that this offense definitely wants to correct. Just trying to look at other takeaways here that I have. He did say Jared Brown has taken a big step forward and is starting to separate himself in that wide receivers room. Dowell's happy with his progress, but it's still a group that is improving. You've got a lot of guys that are trying to find their footing in that room. So he thinks it's going to come along and fully, come together. But it's going to take, it's a work in progress, like he said. And then switching over to the defensive side of things, Clayton White was calling a very good game. It's kind of the same thing where both the defense and offense were playing very well at the start. And then as the game went along, you noticed that Clayton moved the defense from a 4-man front to a 3-man. And look, he doesn't regret the decision. The idea behind putting 3 men on the defensive line was to be able to have more guys in coverage. And I guess it makes sense because LSU has some really good receivers on the outside, and the run game wasn't much of a concern, I guess, coming into this game. Obviously, LSU ran the football much better this time around, but taking out the receivers in coverage was definitely a big priority, and it's a decision you got to live with, and you just got to move on from it and try to make changes. And another thing he brought up was Dylan Stewart. Obviously, Dylan, on his birthday, didn't have the greatest game in the world. I mean, he didn't have like 2 sacks or anything. And Clayton was saying that, Dylan understands it's not going to be like that every game where he's, getting the backfield every play. And it seems like he's making a sack or a tackle for loss every time he's out in the backfield. I don't think he even finished with any stats on Saturday outside of a fumble recovery. So, White still believes that Dylan had a big impact on the game. I mean, like I said before, he did have the fumble recovery. So just hope he gets back to, playing the way he has been, and I fully expect him to. So they need to also just learn from the penalties, Clayton was saying. He did reach out to Kyle Kennard after the game on Saturday, and then he spoke to him again on Sunday. He knows how much that guy means to this team. I mean, he leads the team, I think, sacks, and he's getting in the backfield all game long, it feels like. I mean, he was able to do it against LSU, able to do it every game so far this year. Mistakes were made. It happens. They just need to learn and move on from it.
A lot of info there, Jack. Thank you.
I don't know if that was much of a spark.
I don't know if it was spark notes, but we still appreciate it because we will dive into all of what you just talked about throughout today's show. But I want to take it back talking about this quarterback situation. I think the number one question that people have leading into this weekend, South Carolina against Akron, is what is the status of LaNorris Sellers? How much do you think fans should expect to see him, if at all, this weekend? Of course, you look at the matchup. You're like, okay, South Carolina is playing Akron. That's a game that they should handily win. They should handily win that game. Of course, you never know what could happen. So is that a chance for LaNorris to rest more? What is your take on this?
Yeah, and just before I even get going, we got a question here. After Robbie Ashford, is the next choice Luke Doty? I just want to address something real quick. I've seen this question come up over and over again. I even answered it on Jack's mailbag earlier this week. We have to stop thinking of the idea that Luke Doty is a quarterback right now, because in my opinion, at least, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this way, Luke hasn't really taken legit quarterback snaps in almost 2 years. He's a wide receiver at this point. And so I feel like you have three other scholarship quarterbacks in there. You have Robbie Ashford, Davis Bevel, Dante Reno. I feel like all those guys would probably play over Luke at quarterback. Not saying Luke can do it, but just wanted to address that because I know it's something that keeps getting brought up. And for me, I just don't see that happening. Now, how the quarterback situation plays out this weekend, if it were me, it's Akron. I don't know if I'd play Lenoris because if he's not at 100%, why run the risk? Here's my thought process behind it. If Carolina can't survive this weekend without Lenoris Sellers, there are bigger problems. Like South Carolina should be able to throw. They could throw you out there, Kendall, at quarterback, and I think they'd be fine because it's just like no disrespect to Akron. But it's the Akron Zips we're talking about. This isn't Ole Miss or anything that we're talking about. Like, give Lenoris the rest if he needs it because you get the bye week after this, and then you don't play again until October 5th in a critical SEC matchup. So I think if he's not 100%, let's sit him. Put Robbie Ashford in there to start. Let him get a little more comfortable in this offense because – they've been, he threw the ball for what it's worth. I thought he threw some nice passes on Saturday. Granted, it wasn't a lot, but it was a very small sample size. And let's have him get more comfortable in this offense because I feel like Carolina's going to rely a lot on the ground game to win on Saturday, even if Lenoris is out there because I don't know if he's going to be 100%. I just get Robbie in there, get him more comfortable whenever he is playing on Saturday, and then try to get some other quarterbacks in there. Maybe this is where we see Davis Bevel finally get some snaps because I think he provides a different look where he can throw the ball a lot more, and maybe that changes things up. I'm not sure. So my point is, if Lenoris is 100% good to go, maybe play him for a quarter or two. But if there's even the slightest – if he's 99% healthy, that 1%, you never know what can happen. I mean, he could be taken down the wrong way again on a sack and his ankle flare up. So – you don't even want to risk it. Give them the rest if you can and go from there.
Yeah, and you have to look at what's ahead this season for South Carolina. So Akron this weekend, then they've got a bye. And then they're home against Ole Miss. And you look at those 3 weeks between Ole Miss, Alabama, and Oklahoma. That's obviously the toughest stretch of South Carolina's schedule throughout the season. So you need to make sure that your number one guy, Lenoris Sellers, is feeling great. And like we said, this weekend should be a game that South Carolina is able to handily win. And I agree with everything that you said, Jack. If you can't win without Lenoris Sellers against a team like Akron, and this is no disrespect to Akron, I know that they're a good program. And hey, I got to give them credit. When they played Ohio State at the beginning of the season, they kept it fairly close in the first half of the game. Obviously, the final score didn't necessarily reflect that, but I will give them credit where credit is due. But yes, South Carolina should come away with a win this weekend, even if your number one quarterback, your top guy, Lenoris Sellers, isn't playing. We want to talk about the offensive line here on the show because that's something that Dowell Loggins mentioned. He said he was fired up about the way that they played. And they're doing a really good job of being able to kind of allow South Carolina to get the run game going. So the pass protection needs to continue to get better. Elaborate on what Dowell Loggins talked about with the offensive line today, Jack. It was a problem, a huge problem last season for South Carolina. It's something that we're seeing is improved this season, but obviously something that needs to continue to improve, to continue to stay strong for South Carolina. You're only as good as your offensive line when it comes to offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret South Carolina's offensive line didn't have a good year last year. They've been so this year. I think what gets lost in translation is there's 13 sacks on the stat sheet right now, but a lot of those are honestly, I'd say a few of those probably more so are not all on the offensive line. There's times where the tight ends aren't blocking well enough. There's just times where like for instance LSU bringing 7 guys crashing in on a blitz and maybe, the offensive line gets enough protection on the inside, but then there's that one guy that just comes home free on the outside. And it's like, oh, well, you got to chalk that up to, tipping your hat to LSU for calling a good game plan there defensively. So, look, the numbers are not great. Seeing 13 sacks through 3 games, it's not ideal. You don't want that. I mean, I think LSU maybe had – I want to say maybe like 5 sacks against Carolina on Saturday, but some of those were just great defensive, plays there. And some of that was just bad blocking. So I think the positives I can take away from this offensive line right now are just the fact that, look, I really liked some of what they did in that game. I mean, look, you don't run for, I've said before, you don't run for as many yards as you do and not have good blocking up front. Like, yeah, I mean, Lenoris and Rocket Sanders can make big plays happen on their own, and even with poor blocking, but that wasn't the case on Saturday. That first drive of the game was about as perfect as it could get from every standpoint, including blocking. And then you couple that with the fact that Lenoris had the 75-yard run. The O-line did a good job of creating a hole there. And then Rocket Sanders, he cuts around the outside. There was good push up front. So I think this offensive line gets a lot of the heat, and maybe not as much as last year, but I feel like they are starting to really progress, and we'll see what happens. But again, if Dow Loggins is satisfied with this offensive line, I think I asked Mazio Bennett about the offense yesterday, and I didn't mention the word offensive line at all. I asked him basically, like, where do you feel like this offense is at right now, and where do you feel like the strength of it is? I mean, I can't remember exactly how I phrased the question, but the point is, he mentioned the offensive line first and foremost. I mean, if these guys are talking so highly about what the guys up front are doing, then I feel like that is more than enough for everyone to feel confident in how they're playing. I mean, we see it with our own eyes on the field, but if their teammates and the coaches are talking well about them, then I feel like that is definitely good enough, to know that they're doing well.
So, Jack, it was interesting on Friday night before South Carolina's game on Saturday. I was here in Charlotte doing a Knights game, and I had someone come up to me and we were talking, and they found out that I covered South Carolina, and this person wasn't a South Carolina fan, but they asked me, they said, what about that guy, Nick Harbor? Like, what about him? Like, what are we seeing there? What's going on? Which leads me into my next question, not specifically about Nick Harbor, but just about guys that you want to see get more involved from an offensive standpoint this weekend. Playing against Akron, maybe a chance to get a couple more guys, the opportunity to get some reps, get out there. Who do you want to see get more involved that you haven't maybe seen enough of this season offensively?
God, wouldn't it be? I'm surprised we haven't heard a like in Rudy, like we haven't heard like a Harbor chant in the stands yet to get him in. Like, it's honestly, it feels like every time we talk to Shane or the coaches or someone, I'm sure it'll get asked tomorrow on Carolina Calls, but it feels like everyone is asking about Nick Harbor, and I guess it's rightfully so because we haven't seen a ton of him lately, and I feel like that's probably one guy you'd like to finally see get involved. I mean, he had 2 catches on Saturday for 18 yards. And he had, I think, 1 catch that was 17 yards and then one that really didn't go for much of a gain. So I think him probably being one of those guys involved a little bit more in this offense, especially when it gets to you're in blowout territory, hopefully, that's when you can really let him shine and cook. Some other guys, I think, in the receiving core, I want to see do more. Dale Von Campbell, I feel like, is getting closer and closer to having that type of like breakout effect. We see, I think last week it was against LSU, he had like a 43-yard catch that got unfortunately called back on I think it was the offensive pass interference on Mazio Bennett, which I still don't understand to this day. He is someone that is kind of similar to Nick in terms of the fact that they're both big guys. But I would like to see more of that deep ball effect with Dale Von, because he's at this point shown that he can do it despite the penalty. Other than that, I want to see more of these running backs get involved, right? I think we've talked about it a lot this week with the coaches. It can't just be Rocket Sanders. Despite how good he's been for Carolina, and he's coming off a huge game against LSU, he can't do it all by himself. You don't want him playing 60, 70 snaps out there on offense unless you need him to. And I think this is a great time to try to get like Oscar Attaway, Juju McDowell more involved. Maybe Matthew Fuller we see in this game a little bit. Bradley Dunn, guys like that, because you want to see in case someone goes down, like a Rocket Sanders or anything. Not saying he will, not hoping he will, but I think you want to see more of what you got in that running back room, because you're gonna need those guys as the season goes along. Because again, by the end of the year, Rocket will be fatigued, I think, if it's the continuous over and over feeding him the ball almost every snap. I mean, you want to mix it up and get him off his feet when you can, if the situation presents itself. So that's probably what I would say, or who I would say is some guys I want to see get in there more and play.
Well, hopefully an opportunity for that this weekend. Let's talk about the play calling here a little bit. Jack, Dowell Loggins talked about it here today. Obviously, South Carolina started off the game against LSU the best possible way that they could have started it off offensively. But this weekend, from a play calling standpoint, is there anything different you want to see, something that you want to see more of from South Carolina?
I think a lot of what they did in that first half is what I want to see. And what do I mean by that? We know they run the ball pretty well. I'd like to see more of that mixing it up, throwing the ball. I think that's something that we saw a good bit of. I mean, you go back to watch that first drive, it was perfect blend of, okay, throw the ball, dump the ball off to Josh Simon, then let let Rocket Sanders run for 25 yards, then, throw another pass. I mean, it's the mixing it up that I want to see more of. And if Sellers is in, I feel like we have the best opportunity to see that and see it done the way it needs to be done. But if it's Robbie Ashford starting this weekend, for instance, I'm interested to see, okay, there were a lot of times in that game where he had opportunities to throw, but he took off and ran, kind of like what we saw with Lenoris in week 1 against Old Dominion. Is there going to be more of a comfort level out there now that if Robbie has to play more, is he just more comfortable out there throwing the ball? We're going to have to see, but that's kind of what I would like to see from this offense is, it feels like the case every week, not running the ball too much, but being able to dice it up a little bit and throw your opponents a little bit off balance without knowing what's going to come.
Yes, definitely. And, you face a team like Akron, then you got to buy, and then you have Ole Miss coming in. And I don't want to jump too far ahead and start talking about Ole Miss when we're still more than 2 weeks away from that game. But Ole Miss is a very, very good football team, and you want to try to get Robbie as comfortable as you possibly can because you never know. We hope that Lenoris is all good to go and ready to come back and feeling great. But in this sport of football, injuries can present themselves and pop up at any given moment. So maybe a chance for him this weekend, if Lenoris does not, in fact, play for South Carolina, to just get a little bit more comfortable because you never know what the season can bring. Although we do hope for nothing but health and good things coming for all of the players that are, playing, whether for South Carolina or against South Carolina. But Jack, get into the defense in just a little bit. I want to ask you before we finish this conversation about offense here today and what Dowell Loggins had to say. Any final comments or thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing I want to specify, going back to the quarterback talk, is I think it wouldn't be shocking if Lenoris isn't out there on Saturday. And I think, again, like I said, if he's close to 100%, I just don't know if I'd even chance it at all. Because again, it's like he takes a bad sack again or something like he did on Saturday. He gets swallowed up. Who knows what could happen? Don't even chance it. Give him the time off if you can, and let Robbie kind of cook with this offense and maybe get Davis Bevel in there. So basically what I'm trying to get at is like, look, if we don't see Lenoris out there on Saturday, like if the injury report comes out, or I know there's not an injury report, but I'm saying like if the depth chart comes out or something and Shane just says, we're going to rock with Robbie this weekend, don't be surprised, but also don't, just assume the worst, I guess, because, it's not like you have to think about it from a bigger perspective of it's just Akron. It's not Ole Miss. It's not Alabama. It's not Oklahoma. Don't risk getting him hurt when you can win this game without him. And that's kind of the thing for me that I'm interested in seeing. I mean, Dowell said he was straight up just asked, is Lenoris going to be good for this weekend? And he kind of dodged the question a little bit. He just said, Lenoris is getting better today, and then he's getting better tomorrow, and we expect him to do more tomorrow. So I don't know what that's going to mean. It didn't answer the question, not even close to it all. So we'll find out probably Saturday, right before kickoff, if Lenoris is going to be out there. But, I would say my advice would be just don't, overreact to the fact of, just because he's out this game means he's out for the rest of the season. That's not going to be the case. South Carolina's got a few weeks to prepare for Ole Miss, and there are going to be bigger fish to fry as the season goes along. And like you said, October is going to be a gauntlet of a month.
My brother went to law school at Ole Miss, so that game has been circled on my calendar for a long time. A little family rivalry going on.
Oh, yeah.
in the Smith household for the South Carolina Ole Miss game on October 5th. I'll be in Columbia for that game, actually watching the game and enjoying the game.
Oh, wow. That's
So
crazy.
that's like something that doesn't happen very often for me. I feel like most games I'm working or I'm at a different job watching from afar. So this one will be nice to definitely lock in and be able to watch the game from the stands. Again, 2 weeks away, so don't want to jump too far ahead and get into that conversation, but just had to throw that one out there right now. And yeah, we get, comments from all of you and we appreciate them. And there's one right there, Coleman saying if Sellers isn't 100%, don't play him and give Ashford the chance to get some reps. I think Jack and I are in agreement on that statement. Whether the coaching staff will make that decision or not, we will see. But it is funny, when you get the question asked, how's Lenore's doing? Is he going to play this weekend? Kind of dancing around that question a little bit. Dowell Loggins not necessarily saying straight up what the answer will be, but I think if we had to guess on it right now, we would probably say that they're going to let him rest and give him the time that he needs to kind of reset so he can be ready for that schedule that is going to come fast, and it is going to be tough for South Carolina. But Jack, let's talk about the defense. Before we do, though, we've got another great sponsor of this show.
Yeah, so we have our newest sponsor for a few weeks now has been Prize Picks. So if you don't know anything about them, Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in all of North America. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players' stat projections. And then, of course, you'll watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks has quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. It's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. I've had a lot of experience using this platform, or I should say app, over the years. It's definitely my favorite way of having a little bit more fun watching sports, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone. I mean, you can, NFL, college football, of course, Major League Baseball postseason is not too far away, and then obviously the NBA and NHL aren't too far away either. And it's not just those sports; it's literally just about any sport you could think of. It's most likely probably on Prize Picks. So just go to PrizePicks.com or download the Prize Picks app and use the code on screen GC, which stands for Gamecock Central, to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. And we want to welcome Prize Picks to the GC Live family, of course.
Jack, you're going to get mad at me for asking this question, but you mentioned the MLB playoffs there. Is your team the Yankees? It's not the Mets, right?
No. It's always been the Yankees. They are looking good right now, up 4 games on the Orioles, and I think there's like 11 games. They have a chance to clinch a postseason berth tonight in Seattle if they win. So we'll keep my fingers crossed for that. So
I've seen the Yankees play 3 times in the last month in person.
Yeah, you saw them playing at Wrigley, right?
Yes, twice at Wrigley, and then I saw them play at Yankee Stadium in
so cool.
August against the Rockies. And I'll say this, I'm sorry to any Yankees fans that are watching. I've been to 3 Yankees games over the last month in person, and not one home run has been hit from the New York Yankees, which I feel like is very bizarre considering that lineup and how good they are offensively.
Totally.
So maybe I'm the problem. I'm the problem here.
Probably. Yeah, it's
I'm
you.
hitting home runs when I'm around. I don't know what I was ready for it. But anyways, good luck to your Yankees in the postseason. That's going to be exciting. Very exciting. Well, we're back to football. Sorry, everybody. Not talking about baseball here on the show. Just had to bring that up really quick. He brought up the MLB. My ears perked up, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk defense here. Clayton White getting the chance to also speak with the media earlier today. Something that he said that stood out to me, Jack. One of the things that he mentioned, and you were there, don't get mad twice. So it's been that way since January 2021. Make sure they learn from their mistakes as a defense. Hard game last week, but a lot of bright spots coming from the defense. What'd you think about what Clayton had to say today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good that you can take away from the defensive performance last Saturday. There's also a lot of things that need to be improved upon. Obviously, penalties. We're not going to really get into much of that today because that's not what today is about. We're moving on. But they need to learn from the penalties. That is something that I talked about before. 13 of them, way too many, right, wrong, or whatever you want to call them. It's something that can be corrected. And you got to do that. It's also missed tackles. That's another thing that Clayton talked about. The reason why he felt maybe there were so many missed tackles, I mean, they had 17 this game, guys. I mean, for reference, I think they only had 19 through the first 2 games of the year. So that's kind of a stark contrast there. So he just said it's like, overstriding instead of breaking down on tackles. And then sometimes they just didn't wrap up and squeeze on those plays. So can't be giving teams second chances, and especially for a team like Akron. I mean, a team that really comes in here with nothing to lose. I mean, they're getting paid a boatload of money to come in here, and they're essentially playing with house money. I mean, if they come in here and just start rolling offensively, I feel like it would be because of the fact that South Carolina just is not doing what they need to do, and they've got to be able to tackle, got to be able to create turnovers, and they got to be playing disciplined football. It's easier said than done, but for a team that's been playing super well for the most part this season, I would expect nothing less going into a matchup. You really should be able to put your foot down and never let Akron get up at all.
We've said so many times, it's the Akron game. You should win this game by a lot. Again, you never want to underestimate these teams. And like you said, playing with house money, like they really have nothing to lose coming into South Carolina this weekend. From Clayton's perspective, what are the biggest obstacles and challenges that Akron will present to South Carolina's defense this weekend?
Yeah, so with the little, info we have on Akron, because again, it's a 3-game sample size, and they've only played, they played Ohio State and Rutgers, and then they, squeaked out a win over Colgate. What we do know is they seem to really run a 2-quarterback type of system. Ben Finley is, their main guy at quarterback. He's 50 for 88 this year with 5 touchdowns and 3 picks. But then they also have Taj Bullock, who, again, is 13 of 17 passing, 76.5% completion rate. But he's more of their mobile quarterback. So I think Clayton kind of compared it today to when South Carolina had Spencer Rattler last year as the main guy. And then if the situation presented itself, have a guy like Lenoris Sellers come in and present that dual threat capability. So I think that's probably the best way to compare it. But again, I think Carolina should be able to really swallow up this offense of Akron. Akron's leading receiver right now is Adrian Norton, 8 catches for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they have some guys on the outside that are going to be a little bit of a threat. In the run game, Jordan Simmons is their leading back, 25 carries, 160 yards, 1 touchdown this year with a long of 73. So just contain what they do at quarterback, because I think that's the main thing. Like, if they mix it up a little bit, they got to be prepared for it defensively. Obviously, if Bullock's in, they're probably going to lean a little bit more towards the run. And if Finley's in there, all bets are off the table, but probably more so passing. So I'll be really interested to see how Carolina handles this. I think it's a little different from what they've seen so far this year. But look, Big Ten teams that they faced this year, like Ohio State and Rutgers, have been able to really neutralize what Akron does offensively. So I would expect much of the same for the Gamecocks this weekend.
Oh, I'm muted. Oh my goodness. That was
It's okay.
So bad. That drives me crazy when people do that. So I'm so sorry. I had myself muted because for a second there, I don't know if it was my Wi-Fi or your Wi-Fi. Something's going in and out. Probably my Wi-Fi, I would imagine. But sorry for muting myself. Yes, Jack, I think spot on. And, we talk about some of these specific players on defense, and someone that you mentioned at the beginning of the show was Dylan Stewart. And he's a guy that came in so good for South Carolina in the first game, in the first couple weeks of the season. Last week, maybe a little bit more quiet against LSU, but that's something that Clayton White talked about. It's not normal to get 2 sacks every single game, especially when you're Dylan Stewart's age. But wow, he has come in and been very impressive for South Carolina. There's no denying that. Your assessment on where Dylan Stewart is at right now for the Gamecocks, Jack?
Yeah, he's been very, very good for this team. You got to be happy with the progress he's made. Obviously, LSU is a challenge that, it hasn't been like that at all this year. Nothing to that level, because LSU's offensive line is really outstanding. And I know a lot of people are going to go out there and say that the one tackle, Jones, for LSU was holding Dylan every single play. And look, I've seen some of the pictures of people taking the snapshots of Dylan getting held. I've seen it. I understand it. So my point is, again, like Clayton said, it's not going to be 2 sacks every game, but I do expect Dylan to kind of get back to that level of productivity that he had against Old Dominion and Kentucky. Because I mean, look, Akron's offensive line is Akron. Like it's not anything special. Again, I think you could say about this team in general. I mean, there's a reason why they haven't won many games over the last few years. And look, I mean, South Carolina's got to be able to really pressure the quarterbacks this weekend. And I feel like Dylan is definitely going to have a real bounce back game. Maybe not 2 sacks, but I definitely expect him to be getting into the backfield a lot more. And eventually, as much as he does get back in there, I think the sacks and the tackles for loss, the big plays will come because he's continuing to get back in there.
You have to imagine this weekend for South Carolina is going to be a big bounce back performance in general. I mean, I think South Carolina played well against LSU. Of course, there were moments that could have been better and maybe some calls that could have been better as well. But you move on, you turn the page, you get ready for the next game. And that's what South Carolina is doing right now. You just mentioned Kennard there. Who do you expect to have the biggest redemption bounce back week against Akron after the LSU loss?
Man,
tough question. I won't limit you to one answer.
No, it's okay.
You can only pick one person, Jack, across the entire team. Who do you pick?
Surprisingly, Kendall, I know usually I'm bad at this and I give 3 different answers. I am going to go with one person this time because you know what? He's gotten a lot of heat so far this season for his play, and I would really like to see a redemption type of game right here. I'm going with DQ Smith. I want to see him have a massive game. I'm talking interception, some big plays out in the secondary. He's caught a ton of flack for his play this season, and some of it is rightfully so because there are times where he just gets. I mean, we saw first time this year in that Old Dominion game, he gets beat on that 72-yard touchdown that the Monarchs had, and you saw some of it again over the last 2 weeks, but I would really like to see him go out there, have a nice game, and really set the tone for what the rest of the season can look like for him because there's still so much time left in the season. And I know DQ's a very good player. I know he's had some struggles, but then again, everyone has. And I think that's the one guy, if I'm picking someone to have a big game this weekend, maybe it won't happen, but I would love to see DQ have a big game on Saturday.
Going back just to what we talked about on offense, you mentioned Robbie Ashford maybe wanting to get him a little bit more comfortable this weekend when you're playing Akron. We talk about some of the problems that South Carolina has faced up until this point of the season. You're taking on Akron this weekend, Jack. What is it that you want to see from this team improve on the most as a whole generally? Like, what are those little moments, those things in the game that they need to fine tune so that way it's squared away in the best possible position that it can be when you take on Ole Miss?
Discipline, easily. 13 penalties, like I said before, right, wrong, whatever the case, however you feel about the penalties, there were penalties in that game that South Carolina had complete control over with not jumping off sides, false starts, things like that they are in complete control of, and it's not really up to the refs. It's not as much of a judgment call as it is with like pass interference or roughing the pass or whatever the case might be. I'd like to see South Carolina really limit the penalties and just the mistakes in general. Like, play clean football, make your tackles. Don't let Akron slip out of a tackle and turn a 2-yard gain into a 10-yard gain. Like, if that's the case, someone better be right behind the guy that misses a tackle and cleans it right up and finishes it off. So it's things like that I want to see. But just in general, I think more of what we saw in that first half. Play that way that you did against LSU in that first half for 60 minutes, and you will win this football game. I mean, I think they're going to win anyway, but you will leave zero doubt. And I think you can honestly cover whatever the spread is right now. I think it's like 4 touchdowns. You can definitely go out there and do it. But again, it's going to have to take, I think, those things to definitely have a great game.
I agree. I love how you didn't even hesitate. I said, "What's the one thing?" You said, "You cut me off before I even
It's
finished."
it,
And you
it's
said
just
discipline.
it's just simple things that, and it's such a main talking point from the game. And I know we said we're not going to talk about penalties, but it's just like, look, I would really like to see South Carolina cut that number down to, like, I don't even know what's realistic, to be honest. Maybe like just 5 or less penalties. I feel like they've been so disciplined over the first 2 games of the year. I feel like they need to get back to that, because 13 was way too much. I mean, either however you want to script it, too many for this team, and just the mistakes in general. Get back to playing clean football, the football that we know this team can play, and I think everything else will kind of take care of itself. But it starts with controlling what you can control.
If I had $1 for every penalty that South Carolina had last week, I'd be able to go buy myself lunch here in Uptown Charlotte. That is not the goal if you're South Carolina. You do not want that. You don't want to be in that position. I shouldn't be able to say if I had $1 for every penalty, I can go buy myself lunch. That's not ideal circumstances. And you were there in person, Jack. So I'm sure from your angle, watching it in person, it was all the more frustrating to see.
Yeah, it was just a lot of now the cat, what's the saying, the cat is the bag is open or whatever. I can't remember.
Cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, the cat's out of the bag. So I said before the show we're not going to talk penalties, but here we
Here
are.
we are talking penalties. It was
Oh
the big
gosh,
story. I mean, when you have
yeah.
commentators bringing it up, that's a massive storyline. And of course, we have a new game to focus on this weekend, but I don't think it's something that South Carolina fans will get over anytime soon.
No,
I can't blame them for that. I really can't.
no, I can't blame them for that either. And look, I mean, whatever opinion you got on penalties, especially, like, I've seen it firsthand. Like, it's a losing argument. It's like, that's why I just don't like talking about the penalties, because it's like there's so many calls in that game that whether you feel right or wrong about whether the call was correct, it's just, someone is going to feel differently about it. And so I think my point being, there were a lot of penalties in that game that really screwed South Carolina over. I mean, the more I watch it, it's like, the roughing the passer or unnecessary roughness call on Kyle Kennard late in that game. I think that was kind of ridiculous. I think that was totally overblown by the refs, and it's got to be the refs need to do a better job in general. Like, that is something that I think everyone can attest to, not just this game, but just in general. Like, it's gotten out of hand to where officiating is deciding more games than it really needs to be. And I know there's arguments for, like, robo refs and just different ideas to change the calls. But again, we can't do anything about what happened on Saturday. You kind of just have to, as Mr. Joker says here, those calls are out of control. Can only focus on what can be changed. And this weekend, I think you really want to see this team get back to controlling what they can control and play more disciplined football, because there were penalties, like I said, that South Carolina didn't have to, to take. I mean, the false starts, the offside, stuff like that. But at the same time, the refs need to do a better job. And that is something I hope to see the rest of the season, because I don't know if I can handle another game where there are 13 penalties, because it just creates so much more unnecessary discussion, in my opinion. Like, I would just like to see a game where everyone is doing their jobs and the penalties aren't, obscure and as crazy as they were on Saturday. Because I mean, it happens every now and then, but the refs in this game, it was just crazy.
I think it's a good question here as well. How do you balance being aggressive with limiting penalties? Because it is hard, if you're South Carolina, you want to make it a no questions asked situation where it's like, all right, I am, not doing anything in the wrong here. A flag should not be thrown. But that's hard. Like, if you do want to play aggressive, if you're South Carolina, you're going to have a couple of those toss-up situations. So how do you handle it?
Yeah, I mean, all right. So with the Kennard penalties, I think that's where we can talk about the aggression the most, because some of them were just blatantly wrong penalties that were called, like the pass interference on Mazio Bennett. I don't think that was aggressive at all by him or anything. And with the Kennard penalties, it's like, okay, the roughing the horse collar tackle, that's just something where he unfortunately grabbed onto the back of the collar and yanked down Nussmeier. So that's just something where he's being aggressive and trying to make a play. It's just, I think he couldn't wrap his entire, couldn't go for the sack essentially. But with the the unnecessary roughness, it's just, I mean, I don't know. I think it's unfortunate that the refs saw it that way to where, I mean, Kennard shoved Nussmeier to the ground. Keep in mind, Nussmeier essentially is now a defender in that situation because he's going after Nicky Minwari on the pick six there. So it should be fair game there, but obviously the refs did not see it that way. And so I don't know how to specifically answer this question because it's a good one. And that's the tough part is that I don't know. It's just, I mean, you can't just not. It's not like you can just flip off a switch. I don't think. I don't know. I honestly don't know the best way to answer because it really is a tough question.
Ask Shane.
Literally, hey, tomorrow Carolina calls. That's the perfect question to ask Shane Beamer if you get the chance. So that is a really good question, Big Red. Now I truly am sorry I can't answer that better. It's just I just don't know if there's an easy way to not, because you have to play aggressive to play football, in my opinion. Maybe it's more so just being smarter in those situations. Like if you're Kennard, if that situation appears again on Saturday, it's like, hey, maybe because the refs called it last time, maybe just put your hands on the guy and just drive him back. Maybe don't shove him to the ground. You know what I mean? Just, I don't know if there's a great way to go about it, but you just got to play football to the best of your ability while playing smart.
Well, a loss for South Carolina, unfortunately, on Saturday. But at this point, nothing that can be done. You just move on to the next game, which now is Akron. For the Gamecocks this Saturday, they control what they can control. It is a cliche, but it makes sense in this situation. It's all that you can do if you're South Carolina. You move on, you get ready for the next game, and you just take it game by game. Because in the grind of a football season, that is really all you can ask of your players and all you can do at that point. When you look at what's to come for South Carolina, you take each win where you can get it. South Carolina's schedule so incredibly difficult, and this is something that we harp on each and every year, and you don't necessarily want to use that as the excuse for everything, but it is. I mean, it truly is. A lot of these other teams that South Carolina is facing, you look at Ole Miss's schedule to start off the season, it's not exactly like they're playing the hardest schedule in the country. South Carolina already taking on 2 SEC opponents in the season, just started 2 out of their 3 games to start off the season against SEC opponents. So not easy, but they do all that they can do to try to make sure that they put themselves in a good position to come away with wins. Jack, we're getting towards the end of this show here. I want to make sure that there's nothing we didn't hit that you would like to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, let's just move on to the next game. I mean, like you said it perfectly. It's South Carolina does have a tough schedule remaining. I mean, Ole Miss, Bama, Oklahoma, that month right there, not looking too far ahead, is definitely the toughest portion of the schedule because right now those are all top 15 teams in the country. And that might change because Alabama's got to play Georgia at some point. Tennessee is going to Norman to play Oklahoma this weekend. And then Ole Miss obviously has the most cupcake schedule. So Ole Miss should be still in the top 5. But the point is October's going to be tough. November's going to be tough. But this week, it's about Akron. It's about moving on from the penalties and just playing a clean game of football. I think Carolina's going to come out with a lot of fire and ready to roll. And I think they're going to want to take out maybe some of that aggression they had or just, that pain they had from the LSU game and just inflict it on Akron without getting called for penalties. So it would be great just to see South Carolina just explode this weekend, have a win where you don't have any sweat dripping. It's just it's fourth quarter and you're up by 35 points. That would be fantastic. And Big Red asks another good follow-up question. Does last week's game make the team more or less aggressive? Maybe some players want to make sure to not commit the same penalties. Yeah, definitely. And that's a good question. I think I can actually better answer this time, hopefully. I think last week's game is going to make this team more aggressive in the fact of they need to come out and play well to start. Like, make a statement in this game, even though it's against Akron. Play your brand of football and leave no doubt. At the same time, from an aggression standpoint with the penalties and stuff, I think it's not so much about playing aggressive, but just like I said before, playing smarter football, like knowing the situation and it's not no jumping off sides, no keep your hands where it's not pass interference can't be called. You know what I mean? It's just do what you can to control the game and make sure that you're not, having penalty galore again. I think that's something we could definitely see this team get back to this weekend is playing a mistake-free football game.
Yes, South Carolina certainly with a lot to prove after last Saturday's loss, and I think some frustration that they would certainly like to just move on from and come out and win this game decisively. Do want to say one more time, I know we've been saying, oh, it's Akron, Robbie Ashford will play, and we need to make sure that we're dialed in on this game here this weekend. You never know what could happen. You're hoping they should come away with a big win. They should. But we don't want to sit here on the show and just completely underestimate it and throw it to the side and be like, yep. And then after that, we've got Ole Miss, and we're going to focus on Ole Miss on October 5th. Nope. You have to take it week by week. I think that's what happened a little bit in week 1. I think people said, oh, it's Old Dominion on the schedule. Easy win for South Carolina. We'll roll right into Kentucky 1-0, see what happens.
Didn't go that way.
Let's make sure that we are keeping that in mind before we jinx anything, I guess is what I should say. So looking forward to this Saturday's game, Jack. I know that you will be there. I know a lot of you will be there as well. So certainly be safe out there. If you're watching from home on your couch like me, enjoy it. Kick your feet up. This is my first Saturday getting to actually watch college football for a full day. My plan, Jack, is just to sit on my couch from the moment college game day comes on at 9 a.m. and not leave my couch until the game is over at whatever time it's over, 11 p.m.
Oh, aren't you lucky you get to watch
Hey, I have been there and done that, what you're doing. I have been there and done that.
Oh, I know.
And it's fun. And it's exciting and it's great. I mean, you really don't get a better view of the game than what you get to experience. So yeah,
that'll be me next Saturday. So
that'll be you next Saturday on the bye weekend.
Oh, yeah, on the bye week.
Yes, your bye is coming up fast. How do you feel about the bye being at the point in the season where it is? I feel like 2 weeks later would be helpful. I think it's a little early this year. I'm not saying for South Carolina. I'm saying for us and for you as someone who is covering the team every week. How do you feel about it being where it is?
Well, the thing is, there's 2 bye weeks this year. So you get one at the end of September and then the one at the end of October. So I think it's a good mix because now there's going to be 2 bye weeks. And I think it's, like I said, it's a good mix. It's, it's a happy medium because from Carolina's perspective, it's, right before the gauntlet in October. And then you get another reset after that big stretch. So I think it's good for them. It's great for me. I mean, 2 weeks and it's not really, there's no time off essentially, but it's not as chaotic, I think, per se. And I'm definitely looking forward to a little bit of downtime starting next week. I mean, I don't know what the schedule is going to look like for me yet next week with work and all that. I'll still be writing every single day probably.
Question mark? Fall baseball?
Oh, God. Fall baseball starts September 30th.
Jack is like, I'm not ready for this.
No, look, I love college baseball as much as the next person. But, man, I would love just a weekend where it's just like I'm not looking on my computer 24/7. I'm just taking it chill, not having to worry about is South Carolina going to win this week. Just nice, easy. The bye week is a win for everyone, I think.
I don't know. I get bored if South Carolina doesn't play. I'll still obviously tune in and watch everybody else, and it's less stressful, I think, and I'm sure everyone can agree with that. But when South Carolina is not playing and it's a bye week, I'm like, just a little bit more bored. But it'll provide good scouting opportunities for Ole Miss. I have watched Ole Miss throughout this entire season, but you can really lock in that situation and really take it all in. I think. I don't know. I think that, bye weeks are great and you need them throughout the season, but I get bored if South Carolina's not playing. So.
Totally. I agree. So it makes things a lot more interesting when the Gamecocks are playing. So
Jack will be pulling double duty with
So fall baseball kicks off September 30th and then full team practice and then they got 2 scrimmages. So it's look, I mean, crossover season's nothing new. So, hope you guys are going to be following along with me for all that. It'll be fun. So,
and then Jack's going to be freaking out throughout the MLB playoffs, seeing if his
gosh, it's going to be something. So, October is going to be crazy. So, it's right around the corner.
I think the Yankees could win it all. I think they have what it takes.
I've seen it before where 2017 they get close. They haven't been that close since 2019. They gave me false hope, and then I don't know. It never seems like it comes into play. But Founders Park's gonna be lit. It's gonna be a great season, I think. And basketball's right around the corner too. Like there's a lot of good things going on right now for Carolina, and hopefully it starts Saturday here again with another win for the football team.
Last thing I have to say before we get out of here, objectively speaking, and feel free to disagree with me in the comments. Objectively speaking, I know you will agree with this, Jack. October is the best month in the entire year for sports. You're in the thick of college football season and NFL season. Basketball is starting. You've got MLB playoffs. Hockey is starting as well. Like you are just getting everything that you could possibly want come October. It's the best. October, and it's next month, and I'm so excited. I get so pumped up for the month of October to come simply because I am so excited about all of the sports options that we have to take in October. Jack. Do you disagree? I knew you would.
No. I love it. Hey, this is a great point. They don't call it for nothing. No, I totally agree. It's going to be a absolute blast. And Kendall, I know busy time is coming up for you with hockey and stuff. So hopefully you get to enjoy all these sports going on. It's going to be every day you're going to have something to watch, I'm sure.
Hey, I love it. I'm grateful for that. Grateful to have something every day to tune into. It makes it all the more exciting. But speaking of tuning in, thank you all so much for tuning in to this edition of GC Live. We have a blast with you guys every single Wednesday and appreciate you listening, tuning in, watching. We encourage you to go check out GamecockCentral.com. You're going to get the most in-depth, up-to-date analysis and news on the South Carolina Gamecocks, not just football, but all of the sports. So go check it out. Check out Gamecock Central on social media. Yes, go see a hockey game this season. You know you want to see it. If you haven't yet, go check it out. Hockey is such a great sport. And South Carolina club hockey is going to play actually here at Truist Field in November. So South Carolina NC State club hockey outdoors, and they will be in the elements here at Truist Field. So looking forward to that one. Thank you all, though, so much for joining us here on GC Live. For Jack Veltri, I'm Kendall Smith. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon.